I want to tell you a bit of a story about career expectations. So, when I was in high school, one of the ways I sort of learned to improve upon myself, I sort of had this logic. I was a lonely kid in beginning of high school, and I really never felt like I fit in. I feel better about that today than I did back then. But it defined who I actually was, where I always felt like an outsider, that I wasn't sort of positioned. I was kind of like, I grew up in a tiny little country school, and for reasons I don't want to discuss, um, you know, I when I made the transition to high school, I kind of lost a bunch of friends, and I felt like that there was like no support group in high school. I think like this is very, very teenage angst is such an important part of who I was because it defines who I am. Because there's like moment for grade 9 and grade 10 where I truly was very lonely as a person trying to find grapple with myself. I didn't have a group of people. I eventually found a great group of kids to hang out with, um, but it took me a long time to find that group to fit in. So one of the ways that I began to think about this, I began first of all by working out. I was kind of like a chubby kid, and so I started working out was like the way to perfect myself. Um, and then after that, it was like, okay, I have a cold. I'm sorry. I had to do well in school because if I did well in school, then everybody would like me, right? Like there was that logic, and it was so deeply ingrained with who I was. And then I did that, got into a good university. Oh my gosh. Um, and then after that, I started applying that logic that if I, um, did well, right? If I applied myself and did well, then, I would be somehow successful and everybody would like me. It was kind of deeply ingrained in me. And perhaps, it was, this injection of testosterone that was happening at the time where I was sort of having this logic, or, perhaps it was truly something that was going on. Um, but I was deeply ingrained with who I was, is that the more that you work, the more that you narrow in on something, the better off that you actually are. And then I got into my PhD program. I eventually made it in, I became an engineer, then I got into a business PhD, but it was a, a different logic at that moment. And I started to feel it when I began. I did my PhD in strategy, and it's a different logic, um, because and I had this logic in the first 3 years or so, where it was like the more I worked and the more sort of courses I took and all this kind of took extra courses in econometrics and um, in a whole bunch. I took essentially like a double load for the first 2 to 3 years of coursework, because I wanted a double major in finance as well as strategy. Um, and so I doubled and I worked really hard and I was doing these things. I didn't do particularly well on the econometric side because I didn't have the prerequisite so much. I was learning it from an engineer's perspective and it's very different mathematics. Um, and so when I was doing it, I thought like you just put in more time, more effort, and then things would work out. And then I actually started really getting into the research game of things. I was trained by really good people. I was proud of the folks. They ended up doing extraordinarily well with themselves. And um, eventually, I started getting in this logic. No matter what you did, right? Like, and this started to hit me in about my third year of assistant professor or so, it really started to hit me. It was like, no matter what you did, the effort that you put in, because I've put in a lot of effort. I got, tens, yeah, at least 10,000 lines of code, um, in sort of software that I built priority, my own software, but I was expected to write. And no matter how much work I put in, there was never going to be like, you're doing a good job. There was never this moment that, you know, that there was like kind of recognition because you'd put in this work, this god awful amount of work, um, and then inevitably you would get rejected. Or, because like I would get rejected a lot, right? And I began, to sort of think about this. The other thing is all of those lines of code that I would write, or validating, doing robustness checks, making sure that everything was lined up correctly, doing all those kind of things. Nobody sees that stuff. And so if you spend a day or a month validating code, going through it, struggling with it, finding different robustness checks, nobody saw it. And everybody thinks that you are, incompetent because you're actually not writing, right? So we've kind of have almost a bifurcation. You'll actually sort of see this in the, success rate. It's either you got people that do quantitative stuff and don't write that much, or people that write a lot, and they're typically the ones that are most successful in the career. Um, and then there's like me that's stuck in the middle, and there's not that many people that do what I do, um, and we don't typically look successful. There is, and they tend to end up going to very high prestige schools, and they don't sort of, it's difficult, right? Like, and so it's like it's a strategy that is, um, people would say it's risky or whatnot, right? But I was just doing my work. I was just doing my thing. That's part of like the whole reciprocity project of building a platform. Is because I think I could do this, right? Like I think it's important to do these kind of things. But what you'll realize after I've done this, and it's very true with the platform, it's very true with everything, is that there is no recognition for it, right? Like people will not sort of see it as it is. And so what do, right? Like I'm kind of meandering here. What do you do when you don't have these, you don't meet career expectations, right? Like it's chronic in the field, in most of our fields. If you've done this, you will understand. It's very chronic. Um, what can you do, right? The only thing that you could do is walk forward one little step at a time. The only thing that you could do is say, I'm good enough today, and I'm going to walk forward regardless of what actually happens. And you have to completely detach from any expectations that the market has on you. That and it's, yeah, it could be a few people, right? But generally, sometimes it's like the market. Um, but you have to detach. You have to say, I'm good enough no matter what. And I see this every single freaking day. It's like so frustrating because I could see people like desperately wanting to be successful, and you'll realize that the market's never going to tell you that you're successful. Like it's never going to reach up and say add a boy or add a girl. It's not going to do that. And so it's you have to stand up and say I am good enough at any moment. You will There will be a moment that everything slaps you in the face, right? Like all of these things, you can do everything right and nothing is not going to work out for you, right? And so you have to detach from this logic of if I just do things right, people would like me, right? And it's really, really taking away. And it's a desperate need that we all have, right? And you have to take a step back and say, I am getting pleasure in different ways. I love myself for different reasons than the sort of conventional success and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm going to look for ways that I can step forward in my life where I enjoy who I am, where um, I'm doing things that are bigger than I am, where you look at it and you say, I am going to keep going regardless of what happens, and I'm going to detach from all of that. The demands on the market are never going to be satisfying, right? Like, you cannot satisfy it. You can't get there in a moment where everything is going to be like, Jerry, there's always going to be somebody that's going to look at you and say, that's it, that's all you did. You're like, you're kind of pathetic, right? Like, um and it doesn't matter where that's coming from. There are those folks that are out there that are going to do that because they don't understand, or they think in terms of strategy. They think in terms of all this other kind of crap. um, you know, if they're not in your shoes, they won't get it, right? And it comes down to a very strong lack of empathy often. Um, but you take a step back and you walk forward and you say, I am good enough. I am going to keep walking step by step by step towards where I want to go. And I'm going to love who I am at every single moment. It's going to happen to everybody because eventually you reach a moment where this does happen, and you just take steps forward, encouraging yourself, loving on yourself every single day. I know that this is wonky, like it's such an important practice to manage this, and to manage to say, I'm okay every day, one little step, one little moment in time, every single day. Practice that. It's hard, but this is going to be fundamental to your career, to fundamental to your life as well. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.